This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Wherever you are, I hope you're sitting because this video is going to be a banger, no doubt. Who remembers this ridiculous Christmas card that was sent out in 2021 after Meghan was exposed in court for lying? As they look forward to 2022, we've made donations on your behalf to several organizations that honor and protect families, from those being relocated from Afghanistan to American families in need of paid parental leave, in which they list Team Rubicon, Welcome.us, Human First Coalition, and Humanity Crew. It was listed these three causes that Meghan was championing for that year. Remember, she called the senators to lobby for it, all done while using her title. This wasn't the strange part about it. What was strange was these organizations that came out of left field for resettling refugees. And so many of us were like, this came out of left field, because in the paragraph, they're like, yeah, we donated on your behalf. Well, no one asked them to donate to these causes. In fact, there was nothing on their website that was indicating that they were supporting and helping refugees now. We really didn't think about it because it didn't make that much sense, aside from perhaps maybe it was Harry who was leading these initiatives because he's a veteran. And since Afghanistan was such a failure in its pulling out, perhaps maybe this was something he was tying himself to. And that was it. We left it at that. So here's where I see some funny business going on. So according to the Christmas card, they said that, yes, we're donating money on your behalf for things to happen in 2022. So when you look at the tax return for 2021, they show two line items for Human First and this Humanity Crew, which you see Human First is 150,000 and then Humanity Crew got 150,000. So a total of 300,000 for helping these organizations. Okay, fair enough. The other two listed, Welcome US and Team Rubicon, no idea where that money is, but we'll get to that in a second. It's not listed on the 2021. We all know that Meghan and Harry are not humanitarians, and they would not be giving $300,000 out of the kindness of their heart without getting something back for it. So when we say that, oh, Meghan and Harry are running out of money, no, I'm going to challenge that and say, I highly doubt that, and I will bet you that money leads back to U.S. taxpayers. So in that same year, Meghan and Harry went to New York. As you can see, they met with Beaverface Hochul and Bill de Blasio. Then you had Meghan and Harry go posing with the woman from the UN. We know that Meghan and Harry have ties with the UN. In fact, they collaborated together with Dr. Tedros on vaccine equity, and we'll talk about that at the very end. Now, I'm sure a majority of you have seen what has been going on here at the US border, as well as what's happening now in New York City, the city that I'm living in at this current moment and being disrupted like no other. Would anybody be surprised that Meghan and Harry are directly connected with this? And most likely have made money off of it, which is the sick part about this. So in February of 2021, an executive order was written by the Biden regime on rebuilding and enhancing programs to resettle refugees and planning for the impact of climate change on migration. Wink, wink. Anyhow, federal dollars went into this program, as it states here, through the United States Refugees Administration's program, the federal government cooperating with private partners and American citizens in communities across the country demonstrates the generosity and core values of our nation while benefiting from the many contributions that refugees make to our country. So in other words, money was given to support resettling these migrants as well as refugees. At the time, the refugees was the big thing on everyone's mind from Afghanistan. And who facilitated and oversaw this program, you might ask? Well, that would be Alejandro Mayorkas, the one that we're trying to kick out of office at the moment, and for whatever reason, are not able to.
The border is closed. The border is secure. The border is closed. Border is secure. The border, we are working to make the border more secure. Border is not open. The border is not open. It has not been open, and it will not be open.
It is my testimony that the
Border is secure, and we are working every day, day and night, to increase its security. We are making it very clear that our border is not open. I want to be very clear. Our borders are not open. And let me also echo the very powerful words of the president. Words do matter.
This is also the guy that will not release Harry's visa information and had set up that disinformation board, of which the censorship industrial complex was all over it. It just so happens that the World Economic Forum has been pro-migration, in which, in one of their annual meetings, they had stated that being a global citizen is no longer reserved for the global elite. Thanks to the democratizing power of technology, it's not a trend determined by privilege or even age, but by attitude. Technology gives us a level of global interconnectedness that we've never before experienced. If we couple the physical, virtual interconnectedness with an attitude of openness, then the world becomes both limitless and a lot smaller. However, this macro trend seems to be experiencing a few setbacks at the moment. There is increased rhetoric in parts of the world about the need for borders and walls. The voices in favor of borders that are heard at the moment come from a position of fear, perhaps of change of the unknown. In some cases, these voices highlight some of the challenges in a society that's changing at speed. Those voices need to be heard and solutions found. And who best to be the middleman between the WEF elites like Soros, Bill Gates, and the lot, and the US government, as well as the UK government and all the other Western governments that are being destroyed by migration, is the UN. And here they have set up a division called IOM. So it's the International Organization of Migration.
On January 20th, the Biden administration unleashed a humanitarian and national security debacle like we haven't seen in a long, long time. And it all traces back to January 20th.
Representative Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin has been personally investigating the border crisis, including with trips to the Darien Gap. He previously accused the federal government of running a human trafficking operation with the migrants. We met with him at a small airport in Del Rio, Texas.
President Biden, one of the first things he did, got rid of Remain in Mexico, started catch and release, and stopped border construction. What's happened? We're going to have over 2 million people that come into our country illegally this year. It's very clear that the United States government, at the behest of the Biden administration, is facilitating. As a result of that signal they sent to the rest of the world, illegal immigration is on steroids. So they knew what Joe Biden had said on the campaign trail, and they expected that he was going to follow through on it, and man, has he followed through on it.
On this issue of people being transported from the border to different parts of the United States, we of course know the Biden administration statement that they are flying people. The other thing we've heard, talking for example to Sheriff Cole, is that the sheriff himself is having to transport these people to these buses run by some NGO. The sheriff himself doesn't even know which organization is running those buses. He's not being told, even though he's trying to figure it out. And so who is running these buses, and where are they bringing these people?
I would speculate it's primarily the NGOs that are doing it at this point. The open borders groups are in charge of the State Department and generally the Department of Homeland Security with the roles that they play, whether it's legal or illegal.
Is this kind of the main facilitator you're seeing, or are there others involved as well that are working as the main facilitators?
It's a good question how many are out there facilitating it. Obviously the cartels, with them running drugs, and oftentimes the human element, the human trafficking, serves as a diversion for trying to pump the drugs, the fentanyl and methamphetamine, into the country. So you have people both doing legal activities as well as illegal activities that get involved with this. I mean, think about the villagers from Bajo Chiquito. They're just filling a gap there, transferring these people, and they have a real interest in doing it because when you have 1,000 migrants that descend on your village of 500 people, you can't accommodate them. It's in their interest to move them along, but if they can make some money along the way, you know, that helps them.
I mean, I was anticipating finding the cartels being the main human trafficking organizations, but now I find out there's all these NGOs. What do you know about these NGOs?
It's really interesting to see. So first trip here in April, down in the McAllen area, Border Patrol said, if you watch like down in Mexico and Central America, you'll see an organization called IOM, sometimes OIM, the two letters are turned around, Organization for Immigration, International Migration. And they said, watch for them because you may see them. And sure enough, heard about them in McAllen, found them down in Panama. They were the chief facilitator of moving people up that first step of the pipeline to Panama. And then at the end of August, when the Afghan evacuees came to a variety of bases, Army bases around the country, including Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, guess what I heard from the commanding officer? He said, yes, OIM will be here to facilitate resettling these people. So they're everywhere. And you have the NGOs that are out there. It is something that we need to take a much deeper look. And I know my office is beginning the process of looking at how IOM is getting their funding, where it's coming from, what's their relationship. They're a United Nations outfit, but what's their relationship with the United States government? Because I've been told that they're contracted by the State Department to do their work. There's a lot of questions that revolve around that, and we need to know what they are doing, because it should not be an international organization that is doing resettlement in America. It should be our government, and our government is not doing that at this point.
So, to help answer some of these questions, yes, the United States does have an agreement with the UN, actually UNHCR, with the U.S. State Department Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. And in it, we are agreeing to help facilitate, with the help of NGOs, to move people who are seeking asylum and are forcibly displaced. Now, we all know that the millions of people that are being forced to move are either being incentivized or they're under the impression that they're going to make lots of money and be taken care of in the United States. I mean, this is why we're seeing such an influx as a result of what the UN has been doing, not only for the United States, but also for the UK, Australia. I mean, any Western world, you have migration. So you have to understand where it's coming from. It is being done by the folks at the WEF, who is using the UN as the middleman to make this happen. And I've talked about this in previous videos. I've also talked about this on my other channel, focusing more on this migration because of the impact it's having on me. And here we are. Our own government has sold the American people out, and it's being financed by America. Just a couple of fun facts that we have here. UNHCR is reporting that over 100 million people worldwide right now are being forcibly displaced. You know, a lot of this is man-induced by these elites. We have wars. We have made-up climate change nonsense. We have these direct, what do you call them? Light-emitting, burning down land, like what happened in Maui. Let's not forget the people in Maui. You know, all this stuff being caused by these people to forcibly displace, and whether it be consume land, take resources. I mean, these elites are greedy little bitches and they like to see people suffer. So this is what they are doing at this moment. And this is why all of a sudden we're seeing this surge in people just all of a sudden being displaced and having to go find somewhere else to live, enduring horrible humanitarian circumstances. But hey, they don't care. They're making a ton of money off the backs of the taxpayers.
Now, you know, also with this Organization of International Migration, you were saying also they were involved in the resettlement of the Afghani refugees. I mean, and this is shocking too, that they're involved in multiple issues like this. What about as well what was happening in Europe with the migration crisis there? Were they involved as well?
Yeah, they were involved in Europe.
So now when you talk about these so-called NGOs, well, look no further. ARCHEWELL says that Humanity Crew is a lifeline to global communities with immediate and long-term needs in the wake of humanitarian crises. They deploy mental health professionals to coordinate effective interventions to address trauma, including psychological support for survivors, coordinating child-friendly spaces, and working with communities and NGOs to ensure culturally appropriate support in a given region. So when you take a look at the website for Humanity Crew, listing are their partners. Front and center is ARCHEWELL, and then the actual program partners, which are the entities that are helping with these facilitation of settlements and migration. There you have UNHCR, which is housing this IOM. You also have the other diabolical entity called the World Health Organization there. The most alarming thing, though, that I see here from the website is the intense focus around children. It is of a concern since right now we have the largest human trafficking going on globally with this forced migration and these various entities. And here we have an NGO that is facilitating and helping these so-called displaced kids.
What about as well what was happening in Europe with the migration crisis there? Were they involved as well?
Yeah, they were involved in Europe. And this is one of the things that it was one of the real outgrowths of the trip from Panama that was so educational. Michael Jan really emphasized to me, he said, you need to look at this in a global sense. And migration is at times being weaponized. That is what is happening here. And that's what we saw with Afghanistan, is where the State Department said, get them on the planes and get them out. Don't worry about their legal status in the United States. State Department officials said that. And that was corroborated on a recent trip that a couple of my colleagues who serve on the Judiciary Committee went over to Qatar, and the commanding officer said, yeah, they were just telling us, get them to America. Don't worry about the papers or whatever. And so we ended up being one of the bases where thousands of people are still residing at this point from Afghanistan. Very few of them have a special immigrant visa, which is what the Biden administration told us back in August. People will have to go through this thorough vetting process, including most of them the SIV process. Hardly any of them went through SIV, which is oftentimes a 1 to 2 year process to really make sure that people are legitimate. And especially Afghanistan, the hotbed of terrorism in the world, Al-Qaeda, organizations, ISIS, organizations like that, and we're not thoroughly vetting people, that is a huge concern. And so what did I hear from the commanding officer in Fort McCoy? He says, IOM is one of the groups. And I'm like, is this the International Organization of Migration? Sure enough, it is. They are working right there in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, to facilitate this process. Heard it in Panama, the end of May. Heard it once again in Wisconsin with the Afghan situation at the end of August, and IOM was there every step of the way.
A local pilot agreed to take us on a flyover of the U.S.-Mexico border. From there, we could see the porous border and the unfinished wall. Yet what use is a wall if the migrant crisis is being facilitated by the United Nations working with NGOs, and with even Border Patrol and law enforcement funneling migrants into the system? IOM, the International Organization for Migration. It's known as OIM in Latin America, and it's part of the United Nations. The question of where the money is coming from is answered on the IOM website. The most commonly named donor is the United States government, and it lists several sub-branches of the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. State Department. The UN organization appears to work directly with the State Department. It says that its refugee resettlement program, which runs on donations from the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, provides extensive support to the U.S. government in carrying out its U.S. refugee admissions program. Among its listed services are medical, training, processing of cases, and transportation. It says the IOM branch in New York works as a liaison between the IOM and the U.S. State Department. And its website also solves some of the mystery where the migrants are getting their money. Under the Refugee Travel Loans tab of its website, it states, All refugees arriving in the United States are offered interest-free travel loans by IOM. And it says IOM arranges for refugee travel using funds furnished by the Department of State.
It notes that refugees need to repay these debts within 46 months after arriving in the United States, and it passes this responsibility to NGOs,
including the Church World Service, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, the International Rescue Committee, and others. American taxpayers are financing the mass migration into the United States, including for operation costs and for direct payments to the migrants. The money is going through various NGOs, which are involved in resettling refugees. And the United Nations, meanwhile, is facilitating the migration into the U.S. under the guidance of the State Department. But are all of these asylum cases legitimate? And if our own immigration and asylum courts can't keep track of migrants once they enter the United States, how can the United Nations ensure that the migrants pay back their loans to the State Department?
So I've been documenting this for about a year and a half. I don't have it with me, but there are documents where there's a whole brochure. It's like a playbook, teaching them from start to finish how to get through Mexico, all these points that you're mentioning, stopping points, bus stations, that there's going to be an NGO representative there to make sure they arrive at the right bus station and that they get on the right bus to the next stopping point. So they're being guided throughout the whole route.
So it's NGOs running the buses, telling them where to go, giving them brochures, teaching them how to do it. Do you know what these NGOs are?
Some of these are Catholic charities. They're tied to the Catholic Church. The funding is coming from United Nations.
United Nations is feeding this?
Yes. I would say most of the money is coming from United Nations, NGOs, Catholic Church, Catholic charities. That's the main financial structure.
We drove to one of the locations known to be a hot spot for illegal crossings into the United States. As we went closer to the river, we started finding identifying documents covering the ground, including discarded ID cards, driver's licenses, passports, and others. What really stood out, though, were folders that could be found scattered amid the documents.
So these are the files that they're provided. This is the UN logo. It's a UN Agency for Refugees in Spanish.
And so the United Nations gives them these pamphlets, huh?
Correct. United Nations and Mexican government as well.
So now that we understand a little bit more, could it be that perhaps maybe the United Nations gave Harry and Meghan the money for which Harry and Meghan then partnered with these two entities that have been actually doing the actual service? That is a possibility. Or they could be supplying this money in which it's a financing arm, just like what they did with World Central Kitchen. And if you're not convinced there, what really solidified it for me, knowing that they are involved with this, is seeing the 2022 tax return and seeing this organization listed. So let's find out what HIAS is all about. Here is Michael Yan and Laura Loomer talking about this organization.
A few days ago, I did a speech here in Dripping Springs, and I said, listen, HIAS, which is something that Brett Weinstein was tweeting about a few hours ago.
And for people that don't know what HIAS is a Jewish organization. They're kind of like Catholic charities. They're basically the Jewish Catholic charities that is, another one of these NGOs that is bringing in invaders, right? Criminal illegal aliens under the guise of charity. And so I'm really looking forward to speaking with these people, because as a Jew myself, I think it's really horrendous that you have HIAS NGOs stationed in Panama that are actively trying to help these people with sympathies for Hamas and Hezbollah get into our country. I mean, did they not learn anything about what just happened on October 7th in Israel? This is what I was just talking to Tom Homan about in the previous segment. I don't know if you were able to catch it, but
I watched
I was talking to him about how
asinine
it is that we are sending, right, over $30 billion to Israel for aid so that they can combat the Iranian proxies and Hamas and Hezbollah. Then we're sending $10 billion to counter that aid, right, to Gaza. as humanitarian aid, which is basically $10 billion to Hamas, because as you know, Hamas controls all of the aid and the flow of the aid in Gaza. And then we're not doing anything to protect our border, right? The Darien Gap's open. You have the southern border. You have all of these Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists who have been identified with active terror cells and encampments and in the jungle, as your brilliant reporting has exposed. These people setting up these very lucrative businesses, paying and accepting funds from people to help them get into the United States. And the Chinese are doing it too. But I find it to be especially egregious that you have Jewish organizations like HIAS that are willingly helping these people, even though they know that they are tied to the very same people who carried out, one of the most barbaric attacks on Jewish people since the time of the Holocaust.
It is. Normally I've been slamming Catholic Charities for year on year, but this time, since Mayorkas is up for impeachment, I lifted and shifted on HIAS because he was a board member on HIAS. If he was,
and he's
a
a Jew.
Catholic Charities,
he's a Jew, and we need to call him out.
Exactly, and he was a board member on HIAS, and then he went to, and you can see him on HIAS.org. I may have frozen again.
No, you're good.
Is it still
you're
there,
good.
Laura?
Yeah, you're there. You're not frozen.
Okay, but yeah, so I lifted and shifted from Catholic Charities and IOM to HIAS because he is. And actually, you're going to see the HIAS office right next to China Camp, like 40 yards away. You can talk with the HIAS workers. I eat breakfast with them. You'll see. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's all in the open. It's like nothing's hidden. Everybody's proud of it. Actually, the lower level people, when I talk with them all the time, they seem like good people. They just have no idea what's going on. They think they're just helping the world. They're like gears in a clock, but they don't know what time it is, right? When you meet them, you're like, these aren't evil people. They have no idea. And likewise with a lot of the Border Patrol I speak with. Now, some of the Border Patrol are very well informed, and others have when you go to the U.S. southern border and talk with Border Patrol, I would say 90 to 95% have never heard of Darien Gap. I've asked so many you wouldn't believe. And most of them are like, no, never heard of it. But the ones who have heard of Darien Gap they'll tend to know quite a lot about it. They'll talk about who's coming through and the camps and all kinds of stuff. So, the ones who actually seek to inform themselves, but then, the other 95% are actually the problem that we have to inform that listen, it's not Panama that's causing this problem. It's our own government. Our own government gives HIAS and Catholic Charities and UNHCR and IOM and all these others that you'll see down there, and a lot of them you've already seen. But it's our own government. Our government is the number one benefactor of, for instance, IOM. IOM dwarfs HIAS and Catholic Charities. IOM is the International Organization for Migration, and that's the big engine of this. Now, there's others, but UNHCR, IOM, all the United Nations, basically. That's the main engine. The United States. Now for IOM, the number two benefactor, by the way, Amy Pope is the American in charge of IOM at this point. She's been in charge for maybe 4.5 or 5 months, and she brags that the United States is the largest donor to IOM. And the second largest is Germany, and the third is not El Salvador, Canada. I was thinking of something I saw in El Salvador at the Canadian consulate. IOM actually shares a building with the Canadian consulate in El Salvador, right? So they're in the same building, and same in Honduras as well, by the way.
Hopefully, many of you have made it this far to see that these two have been aligned with this corrupt regime. And anybody in the comment section today mentions me being part of Trump and, going off onto the right side and the Republicans, I'm going to censor you. I want you to feel what it feels like to have your rights taken away. What is happening here right now, as you can see, is a travesty that's being caused by this current administration. And it's clear Meghan and Harry have their hands all up in it. I don't think any of you at this point have any doubt in your mind that Meghan and Harry have been exploiting every single tragedy that we have seen yet to date over the last 6 years. They've taken advantage of dead children at Uvalde. Meghan and Harry have taken advantage of COVID. I will even bet money that Meghan and Harry made money off of that. So when we say that, Meghan and Harry are strapped for cash, I somehow think differently. I somehow feel like they are profiting from all the stuff that the WEF have been trying to destroy here in the United States and in this world. We can add Meghan and Harry being complicit in human trafficking because these organizations are facilitating it, whether it be here at the border or in Ukraine. This is what's happening, folks. And it's with these organizations, these very same organizations that on paper, as you can see, Meghan and Harry have aligned with. I'm telling you, these two really need to be called in and questioned and investigated. All those 11 shell companies that they have over in Delaware, we need to see where money is going, because if it is the American taxpayer dollars that are going towards that, man, these two need to be put in jail ASAP. I think we can all agree that ARCHEWELL needs to be thoroughly investigated. The chances of that happening probably slim to none as a result of the current administration. We can hope that things change in November of 2024. Otherwise, we're doomed. 4 more years of this, it's going to be over for America. And that's my honest opinion. We need to shut down the UN, stop funding it, and quite frankly, speak up. If your taxpayer money is going to the shit, then, we need to think about, do we want to pay taxes now? Anyhow, before I leave you with this last video clip, to those that don't like when I talk about politics, too bad. I'm going to keep doing it. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later.
You want to talk about a real tragedy? It's right here in the canal zone of Panama City. This whole facility used to be controlled by the U.S. government. It was a military base to protect the Panama Canal. Jimmy Carter gave it away, and now it's basically been taken over by the United Nations and NGOs. One of those right here, OIM, Organization of International Migration. They're the same organization that were handing out condoms and birth control to illegal aliens before they came over the Darien Gap into Panama. Rather than saying, stop, don't do it, they said, here's some condoms, here's some birth control for when you get raped on the way. That's how disgusting these organizations are. They pretend to be good, and all they're doing is feeding on human misery. And this entire facility here, almost every single building here now is either United Nations operation. You've got UNICEF on the other side of this building. You've got the UNHCR. Now they have 2 buildings. That's the refugee side of the United Nations. They've got 2 buildings because they've had to expand. They got too big for this. And on top of that, you even have the Clinton Foundation out here. These organizations need to be defunded, and they need to be investigated for trafficking. They are part of what the cartel's doing. You can't just blame the cartel. These organizations have to come down to. Not another dime of taxpayer dollars should go to the United Nations, and in particular, not to OIM. While they're sitting here living in luxury, they're inviting people to put their lives at risk, to put their children's lives at risk, to illegally travel out of their country and head to the United States to break into our country. Dear Kamala Harris, this is the root cause. The leftist, godless, globalist organizations that you support.
You're such a fraud.